Hello everyone and welcome back to Histories Tech. And today we will be looking at one of the most versatile amphibious vehicles ever created, the Landing Vehicle Tracked, or LVT. Now this vehicle, initially utilized by the Navy and the Marine Corps, ended up becoming an important feature of amphibious warfare for all of World War II. Well, let's go ahead and look at the evolution and development and the reason this vehicle was built. Now, the idea of an amphibious vehicle is nothing new, with designs dating back to the late 1700s. However, these vehicles were used for commercial and industrial purposes, and we wouldn't see the first practical military application of amphibious vehicle until the First World War. And what we would see during World War I was that the British would take their Mark 9 tank and attach floats to it and see what would happen. And we actually see this throughout the 20s into the 30s, the various usage of different tanks and attaching floats to see what could happen. However, there was an actual need for a purpose-built amphibious vehicle that could be launched from ships and deployed on shore to move troops. The concept for this came from this devil dog right here, Lieutenant Colonel Earl Hancock Ellis. Now, Ellis is important because he's the one that predicted that there would be an eventual attack from the Japanese forces in the Pacific and that there would be a need for an amphibious island hopping campaign if they were to ever have to go against Japan in the Pacific. The entire Pacific theater of island hopping utilized by the Marines during World War II is based on Ellis's work in 1921. And one of these called for the development of a vehicle specifically designed for this island hopping campaign. And this is where eccentric inventor Donald Roebling comes in. Roebling, during the early 1930s, had been developing an amphibious vehicle that could move across swamps easily for the transportation of personnel, equipment, and material. 2 years after his alligator design was published in Life magazine, the United States Marine Corps contacted Roebling about building them an amphibious assault vehicle. Now, both the Navy and Roebling did not want to militarize his design. The Navy figured that their conventional landing craft could do the job better than Roebling's, and Roebling did not want to use his invention for warfare. However, after the outbreak of war in Europe in 1939, he changed his mind. The first version of this was known as the LVT-1, and it could carry about 18 fully equipped men or 4,500 pounds. The initial order of the LVT-1 was for 200 amphibious vehicles, and they would actually be a major part of the Battle of Guadalcanal. Now, even before Roebling had finished his LVT-1, there was development of a new LVT, the LVT-2. This was going to be an armed and armored version of his design. And because of the slow development, it actually ended up being completely redesigned and looked very different from the initial LVT-1s. Now, these newly armored versions of the LVTs would actually gain the nickname Amtraks, or amphibious tanks, as some of them would actually be fitted with 37mm cannons from the Stuart light tank. And this would be just the first of many weapon upgrades to the LVT. Now, the next major upgrade to the LVT came at the LVT-3 Bushmaster. Now, this vehicle actually had a redesign to allow it to have a rear-loading ramp, and this allowed it to deploy 30 troops or even a fully loaded Jeep. Because of this feature, it actually became a standard Marine Corps vehicle into the 1950s. Now, the next major weapons upgrade for the LVT was the LVT-A4, which took the 75mm turret and cannon off of the howitzer motor carriage M8 and placed it on an LVT. Now, the Canadians took their version they acquired and replaced the 75mm cannon with a flamethrower, and actually the Chinese nationalists took a version that they managed to capture and replaced it with both the 37mm cannon and a 57mm cannon. The last major upgrade for the LVT was the LVT-A5, and this basically replaced the turret with a powered turret and a gyro stabilizer for the howitzer. In terms of its military service, this vehicle was utilized a lot. It went from being an initially unarmed troop transport during the beginning of World War II with its usage at the Battle of Guadalcanal, in which the Marines basically took whatever weapons they could get their hands on and loaded this vehicle up for protection, to the Battle of Tarawa, when they showed that the LVTs were vulnerable because of their light armor and light arms, to the post-Tarawa changes in which Marine Corps doctrine changed. The Marines wanted more LVTs, but they wanted more of them to be armored. They wanted variants that included heavier arms on them, along with other amphibious vehicles so that they could make different types of landings at different beaches. And this is where we start to see the deployments of the LVTAs as a means of protecting the incoming Marines. And because of this, we would see LVTs and LVTAs deployed with the Marines on every major amphibious campaign of the Pacific Theater. By the time of the Battle of Okinawa, which would see the largest landing craft invasion in history, more than 1,000 LVTs would be deployed for that one battle alone. Now, in terms of the European theater, the British actually utilized the LVT more than any other nation, and their modification was known as the Buffalo. The U.S. Army did utilize some LVTs, mainly in cases of crossing rivers, but it wasn't utilized as much in the European theater as it was in the Pacific. After the Second World War, the LVTs would be utilized in three major conflicts. It would be used by the French during the Indochina War. It would be utilized by United Nations forces during the beginning of the Korean War, and it would actually be used in the 1956 Suez Canal crisis. Now in 1956, the LVT would be replaced by the LVT-P5, which still sees service in a few nations to this day. And the LVT-P5 would actually be replaced by the LVT-P7, now known as the AAVP-7. And to be honest, this is the vehicle that kind of sparked my love for amphibious vehicles, as when I was about 8 years old, I got to ride one of these with the Marine Corps Reserve Unit down in Galveston, Texas. Now, sadly, even though so many were made, there's only a handful of these vehicles left in the world, and they are located in places like the United Kingdom, the American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, or in Beijing, China. But there you go, a quick look at this rather interesting and crucial piece of amphibious technology that, had it not existed, the likelihood of the Marine Corps' success in the Pacific Theater would have more than likely been much lower than it was. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.